The sky fractured like shattering glass. A ripple of golden energy surged through the atmosphere, sending tremors of awe and dread across the world. From the epicenter of the disturbance, a shimmering vortex unfurled, its edges pulsating with an alien brilliance. The people of Earth watched, frozen, as the anomaly coalesced into a singular form. Victoria emerged. Her presence was otherworldly, a symphony of allure and command. Blue skin glistened like polished sapphire under the harsh light of day, while her orange hair cascaded like liquid fire, framing a face that was both ethereal and devastatingly striking. Her yellow dress clung to her body like molten gold, accentuating every curve with an artistry that defied earthly comprehension. When she spoke, her voice was a melody that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly within the soul. "I am Victoria," she declared, her tone carrying the weight of cosmic authority. "I have traversed the stars to judge your species. For millennia, my kind has been the arbiters of existence. Now, Earth stands before my gaze. Prove your worth, or be forgotten." The crowd that had gathered at the foot of her descent recoiled, murmurs of fear and confusion rippling through their ranks. But one figure did not waver. From the crowd stepped Austin, a man whose confidence burned as brightly as the goddess who had arrived. His green eyes blazed with defiance, his chiseled jaw set in determination. His body, sculpted by years of effort, carried the kind of strength that came not only from physical prowess, but also from an unyielding will. "Judge me then," he said, his voice steady as he stepped closer to her. The crowd parted as if his presence alone commanded respect. "If you want to test humanity, I'll stand for us all." Victoria's golden eyes flickered with interest. This was no ordinary mortal. Most humans faltered beneath her gaze, but this one radiated a raw energy she had not encountered in centuries. 7 days, she replied, a sly smile curling her lips. 7 days to prove humanity's worth. Each day, a trial of mind, body, and soul. Do you accept, mortal? Austin's lips quirked into a smirk. What's life without a little challenge? Her smile widened, though the heat behind her eyes betrayed her amusement. Then prepare yourself, she said, stepping closer. The air between them crackled, an almost imperceptible energy pulling their forms together. By dawn, your trial will begin. Victoria disappeared in a cascade of golden light, leaving Austin alone amidst the crowd. The world watched, captivated and uncertain. But for Austin, the challenge wasn't just about survival or proving humanity's worth, it was personal. This goddess, so confident in her superiority, had underestimated him, and he intended to show her just how extraordinary humans could be. As the crowd erupted into chaos, Austin's gaze lingered on the fading remnants of Victoria's departure. 7 days, he murmured. Let's see if you're ready for what humanity can bring. The faintest whisper of her laugh echoed in his mind, as if in reply. The air around Austin erupted with a sudden, violent gust, yanking him out of reality and into a realm of fire and fury. He found himself standing on a jagged expanse of floating obsidian platforms, suspended over an endless ocean of molten lava. The heat was so intense, it felt alive, gnawing at his skin and pressing down on his chest like a living, breathing beast. The lava churned and roared below, spewing fiery geysers that erupted like angry volcanoes. Chains of molten energy snaked through the air, crackling with heat so fierce it distorted the very space around them. The sky above was a seething vortex of orange and black, its clouds swirling with ominous force, and at the center of it all stood Victoria. Her golden dress glimmered like liquid sunlight, untouched by the searing flames around her. Her orange hair cascaded like a roaring inferno, framing her flawless, sapphire blue skin. Her eyes locked on Austin, gleaming with a mix of challenge and intrigue. "Welcome to the trial of blazing souls," she said, her voice resonating like a blade, slicing through the chaos. "This is no mere test of endurance. The flames of this realm will claw at your very essence, seeking to devour your spirit. You must cross this infernal expanse, but the path will not be static. It will fight you. It will change. And it will not forgive failure." Austin smirked, rolling his shoulders as he assessed the shifting platforms of obsidian. "Sounds like a blast," he quipped, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of nervous energy. He wasn't naive. This place was a furnace of death, and Victoria had made it clear she wasn't playing games. Victoria's lips curved into a faint smile, though there was no warmth in it. "Be careful with your bravado, human. The fires here do not simply burn, they consume. Before he could reply, the platform beneath his feet jolted, lurching violently. Without warning, it shattered, sending him plummeting toward the boiling lava below. Instinct kicked in, and Austin lunged for the nearest ledge, gripping the edge as searing heat licked at his legs. He pulled himself up just as the platform he'd grabbed started to dissolve. The ground was alive, melting, reforming, shattering without pattern or mercy. The only constant was the chaos. Victoria watched him from her own stable platform, her arms crossed, as if this were nothing more than a passing amusement. "You'll need more than brute strength to survive this, Austin," she called out, her voice carrying effortlessly over the roaring inferno. "This trial demands focus, adaptability, and an unbreakable will." Austin leaped to the next platform as the one beneath him crumbled into the lava, landing in a crouch. His boots skidded on the slick obsidian, but he caught his balance. He could feel the flames testing him, probing his resolve as though they were sentient beings hunting for weakness. Suddenly, the lava below erupted, and a colossal figure rose from its depths, a titan of flame and stone. Its molten eyes burned with hatred, and its voice was a thunderous growl that made the entire realm quake. "Who dares trespass in the domain of the infernal guardian?" The titan roared, its voice so loud it felt like it could shatter bones. It turned its blazing gaze on Austin, and with a deafening roar, it swung one massive, molten arm toward him. Austin dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the blow, as the platform he'd been standing on disintegrated into a shower of molten shards. He landed hard on a smaller ledge, the heat searing his skin through his clothes. The Titan's molten form loomed above him, radiating a heat so intense it threatened to snuff out the air itself. Victoria raised a hand, her golden dress billowing around her like a second flame. "This is your trial, mortal," she said, her voice steady and commanding. "Show me what you are made of." Austin's heart pounded in his chest as the Titan swung again, its fiery fist crashing into another platform and sending shards of obsidian flying in every direction. One of the fragments struck him across the shoulder, slicing through his shirt and drawing blood. He grit his teeth, adrenaline surging as he scrambled to his feet. "All right, big guy," he muttered, glaring at the Titan. "Let's see if you can keep up." With a burst of energy, Austin leaped to a higher platform, narrowly avoiding another swing. The platform shifted under his weight, forcing him to jump again and again as the terrain continued to morph unpredictably. The Titan roared in frustration, hurling streams of molten fire at him, but he dodged each one with increasing precision. As he moved, Austin felt something shift within him, a fire of his own, ignited by sheer determination. The heat of the realm no longer felt oppressive. It felt alive, resonating with his will to survive. He began to anticipate the platform's movements, leaping with a grace and confidence that surprised even him. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she watched. For the first time in centuries, she felt a flicker of something unexpected pride. This human, this mortal, was not merely enduring the trial. He was mastering it. With one final leap, Austin reached the final platform, landing hard as the Titan swung one last, desperate blow. The platform beneath the Titan's molten arm exploded, sending it plunging back into the lava with a deafening roar. The realm fell silent, the only sound the crackling of distant flames. Austin stood tall, his chest heaving, his body drenched in sweat and blood. He turned to Victoria, a triumphant smirk on his face. "Is that all you've got?" he asked, his voice steady despite the exhaustion etched into his features. Victoria stepped onto his platform, her golden dress flowing around her like molten light. Her gaze met his, and for a moment, the air between them seemed to crackle with an intensity that had nothing to do with the flames. "You have exceeded my expectations, Austin," she said, her voice softer now, tinged with something that might have been admiration. "But this is only the beginning." Her hand brushed against his arm as she stepped past him, the contact sending a jolt through them both. She turned back, her golden eyes locking onto his. "Prepare yourself, mortal. The next trial will make this one look like a spark in the wind." With that, she disappeared in a burst of golden light, leaving Austin alone on the cooling obsidian platform. He stared after her, his heart still racing, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Can't wait," he murmured, his voice laced with anticipation. The heat of the inferno gave way to a chill, so biting it clawed at Austin's very soul. One moment, he was standing on the obsidian platform, breathing hard from his victory over the infernal guardian. The next, the world around him dissolved, plunging him into darkness so deep it seemed to devour light itself. He stumbled, his footing unstable, as the ground beneath him shifted and warped. The air was icy and thin, carrying a faint, haunting whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Shadows swirled around him, forming shapes that slithered and danced just out of reach. Victoria's voice broke the silence, rich and commanding, yet tinged with a subtle edge of danger. "You now stand in the abyss of echoing shadows," she said, her golden eyes glowing faintly in the void as she materialized before him. This time, she wore a darker, almost translucent dress that shimmered like starlight, its fluid movements mimicking the restless shadows around her. "The shadows here are not mere darkness," she continued, stepping closer. "They are the echoes of your own mind, your fears, your doubts, your regrets. To pass this trial, you must face them, confront them, and above all, overcome them." Austin squared his shoulders, his green eyes meeting hers. Despite the growing unease clawing at the edges of his mind, his voice was steady. "Sounds like a bad night at the therapist's office. Let's get it over with." Victoria's lips curved into a faint smile, but her expression was unreadable. "Bravery will not carry you far here," she said. "This trial is not about strength or agility. It is about resilience. Even the strongest wills can falter when faced with the truths they hide from themselves." Without another word, she gestured with her hand, and the void around them began to shift. The swirling shadows grew more distinct, taking on forms that sent a chill down Austin's spine. He saw himself reflections of his past walking toward him, their eyes gleaming with a cruel, otherworldly light. The first figure stepped forward, a younger version of himself dressed in a military uniform. His face was twisted with anger and pain, his green eyes burning with unresolved rage. "You left me behind," the shadow spat, its voice echoing unnaturally. "You ran from everything that made you who you are. Do you even remember who you were before you became this?" Austin's jaw tightened, but he stood his ground. "I remember," he said, his voice low but steady. "I remember every mistake, every failure, but I'm not that person anymore." The shadow snarled, lunging at him, but the moment it made contact, it dissolved into smoke. The air grew colder, the whispers louder, as more figures emerged from the darkness, each one a version of himself, twisted by regret, fear, or despair. They taunted him, their voices a cacophony of accusation and doubt. "You can't save humanity. You're weak. You don't deserve this chance." Austin clenched his fists, his breathing heavy as he fought to keep his mind clear. The shadows pressed closer, their words burrowing into his thoughts like icy daggers. But then, through the chaos, he felt a presence, Victoria. She stood at the edge of the swirling maelstrom, her golden eyes fixed on him. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her gaze, something sharp, challenging, almost expectant. It was as if she was daring him to falter, to succumb to the abyss. And yet, beneath the challenge, there was something else, a flicker of belief. Austin's chest heaved as he straightened, his voice cutting through the cacophony. "I'm not perfect," he said, his words steady despite the storm around him. "I've made mistakes. I've been afraid. But that's what makes me human. And if being human means standing in the face of everything I've done wrong and still moving forward, then so be it." The shadows hesitated, their movements slowing as if his words had reached them. The whispers began to fade, replaced by a deep, resonant silence. One by one, the shadows dissolved, their forms melting back into the void. The ground beneath him solidified, and the oppressive chill lifted. The abyss was gone, replaced by a vast, starlit expanse that stretched endlessly in every direction. Victoria stepped forward, her golden eyes meeting his, with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "You've passed," she said, her voice softer now, almost contemplative. "Few mortals can confront their own darkness and emerge unbroken." Austin smirked, though his exhaustion was evident in his posture. "What can I say? I'm full of surprises." Victoria's gaze lingered on him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, the air between them seemed to hum with unspoken tension. Then, with a flick of her wrist, the starry expanse dissolved, and they were back on Earth. "You continue to impress me, Austin," she said, her tone carrying a hint of something she couldn't quite hide. "But the trials will only grow more difficult. You should prepare yourself." Before he could respond, she disappeared in a burst of golden light, leaving him alone once again. Austin stared at the spot where she'd stood, a faint grin playing on his lips. "Bring it on, goddess," he murmured, his voice carrying a note of defiance and anticipation. "I'm just getting started." The air shimmered like heat waves, rising from a summer road, pulling Austin into a realm unlike anything he had seen before. This time, the environment was lush, intoxicating, and alive with sensual energy. A sprawling garden stretched infinitely around him, its paths lined with flowers that glowed faintly under a soft, golden light. The petals seemed to pulse in time with the beat of his heart, and their sweet, heady fragrance hung thick in the air, teasing his senses. At the center of the garden stood Victoria. She was radiant, her golden dress flowing like molten sunlight, accentuating her perfect humanoid figure. Her blue skin shimmered softly under the golden glow, and her orange hair framed her striking face with fiery elegance. As she stepped forward, her movements deliberate and graceful, the garden seemed to respond to her presence. The blossoms leaned toward her, their colors shifting in waves as though drawn by her energy. "This is the Garden of Longing," Victoria said, her voice rich and smooth, carrying an edge of intrigue. "Here, your trial is not about strength or fear. It is about the force that binds and blinds, the thread of desire that shapes the choices of your kind." Austin tilted his head, his green eyes meeting hers. "So, what am I supposed to do? Pick flowers?" Victoria's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "This garden doesn't test with tasks. It reveals. It draws out what you long for most, bringing it to the surface. The question is not whether you can resist, but whether you can navigate the truth of your own desires." The air around him grew warmer, the garden closing in, like a living, breathing entity. The blossoms swayed, their glowing petals brushing against his arms as if they were reaching for him. He felt the weight of Victoria's gaze on him, her presence commanding and magnetic, as if she were an extension of the garden itself. As he took a cautious step forward, the atmosphere shifted. The golden mist thickened, and the world around him seemed to ripple. The flowers closest to him began to bloom in rapid succession, their glowing centers reflecting fragments of images, not of the garden, but of him, of Victoria. In one image, he saw himself standing close to her, his hand brushing hers. In another, her golden dress shimmered as she leaned toward him, her gaze heavy with unspoken emotion. The images grew more vivid, each one more intimate than the last. They weren't explicit, but they were charged with a tension that sent his pulse racing. "This garden doesn't pull these visions from nowhere," Victoria said, her tone softer now, almost teasing. She stepped closer to him, her golden eyes gleaming as they searched his. "It reflects what already exists within you. Tell me, Austin, are these your desires, or are they the garden's creation?" Austin exhaled sharply, the weight of the garden pressing down on him like a physical force. His heart raced, but his resolve held firm. He turned to face her fully, his green eyes locking onto hers with unwavering intensity. "If this is a reflection of me," he said, his voice steady, "then maybe it's also a reflection of you." For the first time, Victoria faltered, if only for a fraction of a second. Her golden eyes widened slightly, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face. But she recovered quickly, her lips curling into a smirk that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You're bold, human," she said, her voice returning to its usual smooth cadence. "But boldness alone won't carry you through this trial." The path beneath Austin's feet began to shift, the glowing flowers weaving themselves into new patterns. The air grew warmer still, and the golden mist seemed to hum with energy. The images in the blossoms began to change, showing not just moments of connection, but also moments of choice paths he had taken and paths he had left behind. Austin stepped forward again, the tension in the air thick enough to cut. Each step brought him closer to Victoria, her presence a beacon in the overwhelming sensory storm of the garden. As he reached her, the blossoms around them flared with golden light, their hum reaching a crescendo. "Is this your trial, or is it ours?" Austin asked, his voice low but steady, his gaze unwavering. Victoria's golden eyes softened, just for a moment, as if something in his words had struck a chord, but she quickly composed herself, her commanding demeanor returning. "You've done well," she said, her tone quieter now, though still firm. "But this garden is only the beginning. The truth of desire is not in its revelation, it's in what you choose to do with it." With a wave of her hand, the garden dissolved into golden light, and they were back on Earth. The connection between them lingered in the air like the fading scent of the blossoms, unspoken but undeniable. "You continue to surprise me, Austin," Victoria said, her voice carrying a hint of something unguarded. "Perhaps there's more to your kind than I anticipated." Austin smirked, his green eyes glinting with quiet confidence. "Guess you'll have to keep testing me to find out." Victoria's lips curved into a faint smile, and for the briefest moment, her golden eyes softened. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she disappeared into a burst of golden light, leaving him alone under the fading glow of the morning sun. As Austin stood there, his heart still pounding, he couldn't shake the feeling that the trial had revealed more than either of them had anticipated. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing. The line between the challenger and the challenged was growing increasingly blurred. Austin's breath caught as the golden light of the previous trial faded, giving way to a chamber of breathtaking beauty. The air was thick with warmth and the subtle hum of energy that vibrated deep within his chest. This place was alive, pulsating with a rhythm that seemed to sync with his heartbeat. The chamber's walls were made of golden glass, reflecting endless versions of himself and her. Victoria stood at the far end of the room, her form bathed in radiant light that made her blue skin gleam like polished sapphire. Her golden dress shimmered as if woven from starlight, clinging to her curves in a way that made it impossible for Austin to look away. Her orange hair cascaded like a fiery waterfall, framing her face with a beauty that felt almost too much to bear. She stepped forward, each movement slow and deliberate, the sound of her heels echoing softly in the chamber. The air between them crackled with an almost magnetic energy, drawing him closer to her without either of them taking another step. "This is the trial of the binding light," Victoria said, her voice a low, velvety murmur that seemed to fill the space around him. "It is not merely a test of will or strength, but of connection. The light will bind us physically, emotionally, spiritually, and in that binding, the truth will be revealed." Austin's pulse quickened, though he masked it with a smirk. Binding? Sounds like things are about to get interesting." Victoria's lips curved into a smile that was equal parts amused and dangerous. "Interesting indeed," she said, "but be warned, this trial does not merely test your ability to connect. It amplifies what already exists between us. You may find the result overwhelming." Without waiting for his response, she raised her hand. A golden beam of light shot down from above, wrapping around them both like a luminous thread. Austin felt its warmth seep into his skin, penetrating deeper with every passing second. The sensation was intoxicating, a mix of soothing calm and electrifying heat that sent shivers through his entire body. As the light solidified, forming a shimmering tether between them, Victoria stepped closer. The distance between them narrowed until they were only inches apart. Austin could feel the heat of her body, see the subtle rise and fall of her chest, hear the faint catch in her breath as her golden eyes locked onto his. "Do you feel it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The pull between us?" Austin swallowed hard, his usual confidence momentarily shaken by the sheer intensity of her presence. "I feel it," he admitted, his voice low and rough. "And I think you do too." For a moment, Victoria's composure wavered. Her eyes softened and her lips parted as if to respond, but no words came. Instead, the light around them flared brighter, the tether pulsing with an energy that seemed to echo the unspoken tension between them. As if drawn by an invisible force, Austin reached out, his hand brushing against hers. The contact sent a jolt through both of them, and Victoria inhaled sharply, her golden eyes widening as she looked at him. The light binding them responded, glowing brighter and pulsing faster, as though it fed on the connection between them. "This trial isn't just about connection, is it?" Austin asked, his voice low but steady. "It's about trust, about letting someone in." Victoria's gaze hardened slightly, but her voice betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. "Trust is not something I give lightly, human," she said. "I have spent millennia judging others, not allowing them to judge me." Austin took a step closer, the tether pulling taut between them. "Maybe that's the point," he said, his green eyes searching hers. "Maybe this trial isn't just about me proving humanity's worth. Maybe it's about you, proving you can see us as more than what you expect." Victoria's lips parted again, but this time, she didn't look away. The light around them grew so bright it was almost blinding, and the tether pulsed with a rhythm that matched the rapid beat of their hearts. The space between them dissolved, leaving only the raw, unfiltered energy of their connection. Austin could feel the weight of her presence, her power, her vulnerability, and something else, something unspoken, but undeniable. "You are unlike anyone I've judged before," Victoria said finally, her voice so soft it was almost a whisper. "You challenge me in ways I did not expect." Austin's smirk returned, but there was warmth behind it. "Guess that makes two of us," he said. The tether between them flared one last time before dissolving into golden sparks that rained down around them. The trial was over, but the connection it had forged lingered in the air, unspoken but palpable. Victoria stepped back, her composure returning as she straightened and folded her arms across her chest. "You have passed this trial," she said, her tone regaining its usual authority. "But the journey is far from over." Austin's green eyes glinted with a mix of confidence and curiosity. "Looking forward to it," he said, his voice steady despite the lingering effect of the trial. Victoria turned, her golden dress shimmering as she began to walk away. But just before she disappeared into the light, she glanced back at him, her golden eyes meeting his one last time. And in that moment, for the briefest of seconds, the goddess allowed herself to smile not with authority, but with something far more human. When the light faded and Austin was left alone, he exhaled deeply, his heart still racing. The trial had tested more than just his resolve. It had pushed him closer to a truth he couldn't yet name. And he knew, as he stood there in the quiet aftermath, that whatever lay ahead would only draw them closer. The world around Austin and Victoria shimmered into a new form, a breathtaking expanse of translucent, floating platforms that reflected the cosmos. Stars twinkled beneath their feet, and galaxies swirled in the infinite expanse above them. The air here was electric, humming with energy that seemed to pull at their very beings. Victoria stood beside him, her golden dress catching the light of the stars, her orange hair flowing like a flame. Her presence, as commanding as ever, now carried something new, a raw intensity that made the air between them almost suffocating. "Now, this is the trial of eternal echoes," she said, her voice steady but rich with meaning. "Each platform carries the memory of choices, connections, and emotions that have defined existence itself. Together, we must navigate them, but the trial will not show mercy if we falter." Austin raised an eyebrow, his green eyes glinting with determination. "Together?" he asked, the weight of the word hanging between them. "Doesn't sound like your usual style." Victoria's golden eyes softened for just a moment. "This trial is not about individuality," she replied. "It is about unity. Our connection, our ability to trust and understand each other will determine whether we succeed." She stepped onto the first platform, the surface rippling like water beneath her feet. With a glance over her shoulder, she extended her hand toward him. It was a simple gesture, but it carried the weight of something far more profound. Austin hesitated only a fraction of a second before taking her hand. Her skin was warm, her grip firm, but not overpowering. The contact sent a surge of energy through him, the tether from their previous trial sparking faintly to life once more. Together, they moved on to the next platform. Each step brought a new challenge. Some platforms glowed warmly, enveloping them in moments of shared understanding, glimpses of each other's fears, hopes, and hidden emotions. Others darkened, pulling them into memories of pain and loss that threatened to tear them apart. At one point, a platform shattered beneath their feet, forcing Austin to pull Victoria close to him to keep them from falling into the void. Her golden eyes met his, and for a fleeting moment, there was no trial, no goddess or mortal, only two beings bound by something neither could fully name. "You won't let me fall," she said softly, more a statement than a question. "Never," he replied, his voice carrying a weight that matched the intensity in her gaze. Finally, they reached the final platform, which pulsed with a radiant golden light. As they stepped onto it, the energy around them surged, lifting them into the air. The cosmos shimmered and danced, their connection made manifest in the glowing tendrils of light that encircled them. "You have passed," the voice of the trial intoned, its words resonating in the stars themselves. "The bond forged here is unbreakable." The light around them dimmed, and the world shifted once more. They found themselves back in the celestial garden, the intoxicating scents and soft glow of the blossoms enveloping them. But this time, the tension between them had reached its peak. Victoria stood before him, her golden eyes searching his with a vulnerability she had never shown before. The air was thick with the unspoken, the tether of their connection still humming faintly between them. "You are unlike anyone I have ever judged," she said, her voice soft, her usual authority giving way to something raw and unguarded. You have challenged me in ways I did not think possible. Austin stepped closer, his green eyes locked onto hers. And you've shown me things I didn't think I could feel, he replied, his voice low and steady. The distance between them vanished, and the energy that had been building between them finally broke free. Their movements were slow at first, deliberate, as if testing the limits of what was unspoken. Victoria's hand brushed against his chest, her fingers trailing upward as her gaze softened. Austin responded, his hand settling on her waist, his grip firm but reverent. The kiss that followed was not hurried, but deliberate, a culmination of the tension and desire that had been simmering between them since the moment they met. It was a connection that carried not just passion, but trust, understanding, and the shared weight of everything they had endured together. Their embrace deepened, the world around them fading into irrelevance as they gave themselves over to the moment. The garden responded, its glowing blossoms leaning toward them, their light intensifying, as if to mirror the energy between them. Though the moment burned with intensity, it was also layered with tenderness. Austin's movements were confident but unhurried, his touch reverent, as if he were learning a language only the two of them could understand. Victoria, for all her cosmic power and dominance, allowed herself to melt into the connection, her usual composure giving way to vulnerability and trust. When they finally pulled apart, their breathing heavy, their gazes locked, the silence between them was not empty, but filled with the weight of everything that had just passed between them. Victoria was the first to speak, her voice softer than he had ever heard it. "You continue to surprise me, Austin," she said, her hand lingering against his chest. He smirked, his green eyes glinting with warmth. "Guess that makes us even." For a moment, the goddess and the mortal stood together, the celestial garden surrounding them, their connection unbreakable. The trials had tested them, but what they had found in each other was something no challenge could take away. The celestial garden, bathed in its usual golden glow, suddenly erupted with violent energy. The soft hum of the blossoms turned into a piercing wail, and the air thickened as if charged with anger. The once gentle sway of the glowing flowers became frantic, their petals flickering like flames caught in a storm. The serene beauty of the space twisted into chaos, and Austin and Victoria were wrenched from their intimate moment. Austin barely had time to process the sudden shift before a voice thundered through the garden, a deep, resonant sound that made the ground tremble. "Victoria, what have you done?" Austin turned, his heart pounding, as a figure stepped into the clearing. It was a towering being, cloaked in radiant white light, its form humanoid, but distinctly alien, like an amalgamation of stars and energy. Its eyes burned like twin suns, casting a piercing glare toward Victoria and Austin. "Zenith," Victoria said, her voice steady but tinged with unease. She stepped forward, her usual confidence tempered with caution. "This is not your concern." "Not my concern," Zenith's voice boomed, shaking the very fabric of the garden. "You have broken the sacred code, Victoria. You, an arbiter of the stars, have allowed yourself to be consumed by mortal passion. And you," the being turned its fiery gaze to Austin, its contempt palpable, "you dare to sully her divinity with your mortal flesh?" Austin clenched his fists, his jaw tightening as he stood his ground. "If this is about us, then take it out on me," he said, his voice firm despite the overwhelming pressure of Zenith's presence. "Leave her out of it." Zenith's gaze narrowed, its light intensifying. "Your arrogance will be your undoing, human. You have corrupted her judgment, defied the sanctity of her purpose, and now you will pay the price." With a wave of its hand, Zenith conjured a vortex of shimmering energy. The garden warped and twisted around them as Austin was ripped from Victoria's side, his body hurtling through the void. He landed hard on a cold, metallic surface, the air forced from his lungs as he scrambled to his feet. He found himself in a vast arena, surrounded by walls of energy that pulsed with deadly light. Above him, celestial beings gathered in a ring of radiant forms, their eyes burning with judgment. In the center of the arena stood Zenith, its glowing form towering over him. "This is the ordeal of defiance," Zenith declared, its voice echoing through the chamber. "If you survive, your actions will be forgiven. If you fail, your mortal existence will end, and your soul will be scattered across the stars." Austin steadied his breathing, his green eyes narrowing as he assessed the arena. He felt Victoria's absence like a weight in his chest, but he pushed the thought aside. If he was going to survive, he needed to focus. "What's the challenge?" he asked, his voice steady despite the odds stacked against him. Zenith extended its hand, and the air around Austin crackled with energy. From the walls of the arena emerged massive, hulking creatures of molten rock and pure energy. Their eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and their movements were slow but deliberate, their immense forms shaking the ground with every step. "Your trial is simple," Zenith said, its tone cold and unyielding. "Survive." The first creature lunged, its molten fist crashing toward Austin with the force of a falling star. He dove to the side, rolling to his feet as the ground where he had stood erupted in a shower of molten debris. The heat was unbearable, but he pushed through the pain, his mind racing. He grabbed a shard of the molten debris, its edges sharp and glowing with heat, and used it to slash at the creature's leg. It roared in fury, staggering slightly, but it was far from defeated. Another creature joined the fray, its body radiating blinding light as it swung a massive, crystalline blade toward him. Austin ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding the blade as it sliced through the air with a sound like shattering glass. His muscles burned, his movements growing slower with every dodge and counter, but he refused to give in. Above the arena, Victoria appeared, her golden form materializing beside the celestial spectators. Her face was etched with a mix of fury and despair as she turned to Zenith. "Enough!" she shouted, her voice ringing out like a thunderclap. "This is not justice. It's cruelty." Zenith's gaze snapped to her, its fiery eyes narrowing. "You dare question my judgment, Victoria? You, who broke the code and brought shame upon our kind." "I question the balance of punishment," she said, stepping closer. "He faces this ordeal not for his actions alone, but for mine. If you judge him, you must judge me as well." The celestial audience murmured, their light flickering as they exchanged silent communication. Zenith hesitated, its form shimmering with uncertainty. Meanwhile, in the arena, Austin managed to land a critical blow against one of the creatures, driving the shard of molten rock into its core. The creature roared, its form collapsing into a pool of glowing liquid. But the effort left Austin staggering, his breath ragged as the remaining creature loomed over him. Victoria's golden eyes met his from above, and something unspoken passed between them, a connection that no trial could sever. She turned back to Zenith, her voice firm and resolute. "Release him, Zenith. If he dies, you lose nothing but a mortal. But if he lives, he proves that humanity is worthy of everything we deny them." Zenith's gaze shifted between Victoria and Austin, the tension in the arena thick enough to cut. Finally, it raised its hand, and the remaining creature dissolved into light. Austin collapsed to his knees, gasping for air as the oppressive energy of the arena faded. "This is not over," Zenith said, its tone heavy with warning. "You both walk a dangerous path, but for now, he is spared." With a wave of its hand, Zenith disappeared, leaving the arena silent. Victoria rushed to Austin's side, her presence a balm against the pain and exhaustion that racked his body. "You didn't have to do that," he said, his voice hoarse but grateful. Her gaze softened, and she placed a hand on his cheek, her touch gentle but firm. "I wasn't going to let you face this alone," she said. "You've proven more than I ever expected, Austin. Not just to them, but to me." As the celestial garden reformed around them, the bond they had forged in fire, light, and passion grew stronger than ever. Whatever lay ahead, they knew they would face it together, no matter the cost. The celestial garden returned around them, serene once more. Austin stood battered but unbroken, his green eyes meeting Victoria's golden gaze. The air between them was thick with unspoken emotion, the weight of their connection transcending the trials they had endured. Victoria stepped closer, her golden dress shimmering in the soft light, her touch tentative as her hand rested against his chest. "Austin," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of her immortal years and the vulnerability she could no longer hide. "You've proven humanity's worth to me in ways I never anticipated, but this connection, it defies the purpose of my existence." He took her hand in his grip firm yet gentle. "Then maybe it's time to rewrite the purpose," he said, his voice steady, "because I'm not walking away from this. From you." For a moment she faltered, her eyes searching his. Then, with a faint smile, she leaned into him, her lips brushing his in a kiss that was neither rushed nor hesitant. It was a promise, a merging of their worlds in defiance of everything that sought to keep them apart. Above them, the stars pulsed as if in approval, and the garden bloomed brighter than ever. Whatever judgment awaited them, they would face it together, bound by a connection stronger than fate itself.